Welcome to a very merry holiday episode of Speakeasy Spirits. Today I want to tackle that holiday favorite, eggnog, but we're going to make ours two different ways. We'll of course make the giant batch of eggnog that you could put out in a punch bowl for a party, but I also want to make a single serving size eggnog. We'll also make an original recipe that I really haven't seen before, a single serving eggnog. If you're at home and just want a single batch, or if you run a bar and you want to put eggnog on your holiday menu, but you don't want to make up giant batches of it, this is going to be a single serving recipe that you can whip up fresh on the spot. Let's start with our single serving eggnog cocktail. Now, this is going to be in the style of a classic cocktail and is going to lean much heavier on the cocktail side than the eggnog side. This is going to be a rum-based cocktail, so we're going to use some Hamilton Zombie Blend, but you could use any good aged rum here. And we're going to get some of our spices from St. Elizabeth Allspice Dram. This will add that nutty, spicy, allspice cinnamon flavor. This is going to be a shaken cocktail, and because it is eggnog, we're going to need one whole egg. Now in this recipe, we are going to use the whole egg, not just the egg yolk. Because the idea for this recipe was something you could make one at a time at a bar, we're going to go with mostly shelf-stable ingredients other than the egg. There's not going to be any cooking involved. We're not going to use whole milk in this recipe. Instead, we're going to use a split of coconut milk and almond milk. Let's start by putting in something easier to measure. If you're making this professionally at a bar, you may have this in a squeeze bottle, but we're just going to go with a measuring cup and then pour out 3/4 of an ounce of coconut milk. You could buy a big jug of almond milk, you could make almond milk yourself at home, or I like using these little packages. This one is good unopened for 6 months or more. So let's do another 3/4 of an ounce of almond milk. Now for our spices, you could use my chai or jha recipe. I'll leave a link in the description below. That's basically equal parts almond milk and sugar with some chai tea bags steeped in it. Typically I'll make about 8 ounces of that, and it'll last me about 3 or 4 months. But we're taking some shortcuts today, so we're going to use this store-bought chai latte concentrate. And we're going to need about 3/4 of an ounce of this as well. Our sweetener is going to be a honey syrup. So here we're going to need 1/2 ounce of honey syrup. This is just a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 parts honey to 1 part water, basically just to thin it out and make it easy to pour and measure. To add a little more spice, we're going to go with 1/4 ounce of the St. Elizabeth Allspice Dram. If you don't have this, Velvet Falernum would probably be a good substitute. And last, let's do 1.5 ounces of our aged rum. And finally, we'll use a couple dashes of bitters. You could use standard Angostura bitters here. They'd work fantastic, but I'm going to mix it up a bit and use some Angostura cocoa bitters. This is going to add a little hint of chocolate to it. Since we've got a whole egg in there, I'm going to start with a dry shake. Now we'll add our ice, and since I still have some, I'm going to use a coconut water ice cube that I used in my tiki old-fashioned cocktail video. You could just use all regular ice here, but I think adding a little more coconut is going to help out this cocktail. Let's get out a festive looking glass. We'll strain our Nogtail. And let's garnish that with a cinnamon stick, star anise, and some grated nutmeg. And there you have the Nogtail. The rum comes through loud and clear. It's just slightly spirit forward. You get those bold molasses and brown sugar notes of the aged rum. The spices pair perfectly with this. It's got just enough sweetness without tasting like melted ice cream. And then you finish with a little bit of creamy coconut and almond. And as you pick up the glass, you just get that smell of Christmas. It's pretty well balanced for a cocktail without any citrus or acids in it. If you were to serve this at your holiday party, I think your guests would be very happy. Now let's mix up our big batch of party nog. We're going to be cooking over medium heat, so we're going to start with our coconut milk, and we're going to need 2 pans. We'll also need 4 cups of whole milk. Now, if you wanted to make this a non-dairy version, you could use 4 cups of almond milk as well. Our sweetness is going to come from 2/3 of a cup of honey. You could also use maple syrup here. It would work great. I'm not using honey syrup in this one. Since we're going to heat it up, the honey's going to integrate better than it would in a cold drink. It's not eggnog without egg. Now we're going to need 10 egg yolks in this. What do you do with all those egg whites? Well, in my case, I freeze them and I'll use them again for egg white cocktails. So let's start by separating our egg. We never separate over the container we're making our drink in. We do it separate. Just in case that happens, I just drop the yolk in there. Sometimes you can't be afraid to get your hands dirty. So we're just going to separate out the yolk with our fingers into our ice cube tray. Now we're going to add that into our drink, and I'll move on to the other 9 eggs. Now we need just a pinch of salt. Now with all that egg in there, we're going to whisk it together. Make sure to get it well combined. Now we're going to drop in a cinnamon stick, and we're going to turn the heat on to low. We're going to want to pay attention to this and stir it pretty regularly as it heats up. We don't want to cook the egg. If you haven't already, make yourself a cocktail and wait for this to heat up. We haven't added any spices to this other than the cinnamon stick. For our spices, we're going to use some chai. Now I'm going to use this Tazo pumpkin spice chai, but any chai will do. You can use your favorite. This is a black tea, so it's got a little bit of caffeine in it, but if you're looking to go completely caffeine free, you can use an herbal chai. I've added 4 tea bags, and we're going to let this steep on low heat. And don't forget to still stir occasionally. We're not looking to cook this, we're just looking to steep it and warm it up. The spices aren't quite strong enough for my liking, so I'm going to add another 4 tea bags and let this steep for about another 5 minutes. Now that we've steeped the chai, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And some grated nutmeg. Once your tea bags have steeped, go ahead and remove them and remove the cinnamon stick. Now our last step, I'm going to add a little more spice with some Angostura bitters. Since this is going to serve about 8, you want to put in about 8 to 10 dashes. Give that a stir. We're going to want a mug for a hot drink. And if any tea leaves have escaped your tea bag, you're going to want a fine mesh strainer. A ladle would work great here, but short of that, I'm just going to use another mug. And we'll strain in our eggnog. We're going to garnish that with a cinnamon stick and some grated nutmeg. There's a non-alcoholic hot eggnog. It's creamy, there's plenty of spices to it, but if you want to spike it, what we'll add is 1.5 ounces of bourbon. I'm going to use this Michter's High Rye Bourbon. Give that a quick stir to combine. And now you've got your adult eggnog. The bourbon really adds a lot of flavor to it. It's a lot more complexity. The spice notes really wake up now. I think with the bourbon, the honey and cinnamon are a lot more present. That may vary depending on the bourbon you're using. But overall, a really great homemade eggnog for your parties. There's 2 versions of eggnog, whether you're throwing a party or you're drinking alone this Christmas. I hope you liked the video. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.